Welcome back to Echoes from the Source. I am so excited for today's deep dive.
Me too.
Um, we're going to be looking at An Intimate Note to a Sincere Seeker by Gurudev.
Oh, excellent choice.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to read this one?
I have, yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
And we're going to be focusing specifically on the chapter called Just a Little Shift.
Yes.
And this one really got me thinking, about how just changing your perspective just a little bit can really
Definitely
change your
big.
whole experience.
It's amazing how much power there is in just shifting our viewpoint a little bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so in this chapter, Gurudev talks about, looking past the surface level
Yes.
of events or even objects and people to find a deeper truth.
Yeah. It's not about denying the reality of what we see and experience, but like you were saying, going deeper, right?
Right.
And he uses this really interesting example of, like, imagine someone's yelling at you. Right, like our immediate reaction might be to get defensive or even yell back. But he suggests that we take a pause and ask,
Yeah.
what's really going on here? You
Yeah.
know, what's beneath the surface?
That's a great point. Yeah. Instead of just reacting to that anger,
Yeah.
maybe we could think about where it's coming from.
Right.
Maybe that person is just having a really stressful day
Yeah.
or something, and it actually has nothing to do with us.
Exactly. It's like their own stuff, you know?
Right.
And he even shares a personal story about a friend who kind of lashed out at him. And at first, he felt hurt, but then he realized that his friend was going through a really tough time personally.
Oh, wow.
And that understanding the context totally shifted his whole perception of the situation.
Yeah, it just makes you realize that
It makes you wonder.
how often we just react to things
Yeah.
without really seeing the full picture,
Yeah.
without understanding the whole story,
Right. And we just assume things based on, like,
Yeah, we make assumptions.
surface appearances.
Totally.
And it's like, he says, it's like seeing a wave crashing on the shore and thinking that's all there is. But we don't see the vast ocean beneath, the currents, the depths that created that wave, And he's saying that real knowledge lies in understanding those hidden depths, the why behind the what.
So instead of just reacting to the wave of, like, someone's anger, we should try to understand the whole ocean of their experience.
Exactly.
Uh,
And, this idea of looking beyond the surface, it applies to objects too, not just events.
oh, interesting, yeah.
We tend to see things as like solid and permanent, but science tells us a very different story.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Like, this coffee mug
Yeah.
seems so solid.
Yeah, totally.
But, like, it's mostly made up of empty space, just like everything else in the universe.
Right. Like if you zoom in close enough, it's mostly nothingness. It's
Yeah.
wild.
Empty space.
And he connects this to the concept of Brahman in Vedanta,
Okay.
which is like this idea of a universal consciousness that permeates everything. And it's like realizing that even seemingly empty space is actually teeming with energy and potential.
Wow, that's amazing. You know what that reminds me of? Like, looking up at the night sky.
Yes.
You feel so small
Oh, yeah.
compared to the vastness of space,
Mhm.
but at the same time, also so connected to something much larger than yourself.
He uses that analogy beautifully. It's like a glimpse into that truth that everything is part of something infinite and interconnected.
Wow. I'm like starting to see this coffee mug in a whole new light now.
Right.
But it sounds like this shift in perspective goes even further
Oh, yeah.
than just events and objects.
It does.
Gurudev also talks about applying it to, like, how we see other people, right?
Absolutely. He challenges this idea that our personalities are fixed and unchanging.
Okay.
After all, who we are today is different from who we were 10 years ago, and it'll be different again 10 years from now.
That's so true.
Right.
So if we're clinging to personalities, like our own or other people,
Yeah, if we get too attached to those labels.
then we're clinging to something that's constantly changing. Like, it's like trying to grasp smoke.
It's like holding on to a wave,
Yeah.
trying to make it stay.
Right.
And that's where the concept of love comes in.
Uh,
He argues that love is the one constant, the essence that endures even as personalities change and evolve.
So, like, beyond all the surface stuff, the
Yeah.
anger, the moods, the quirks, love is the one thing that remains.
Yes. It's the thread that connects us all.
Wow.
He tells this beautiful story about an elderly monk who advised him to look beyond people's like fluctuating moods and words and see the constant love behind their eyes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like no matter what's happening on the surface, there's this deep well of love within each of us.
It makes you wonder if maybe we create a lot of suffering for ourselves by getting so caught up
Oh, absolutely.
in these
Yes.
temporary aspects.
Yeah, all the drama and the stories we create in our minds.
Yeah.
It's like we forget about that underlying connection,
Right.
that love that's always there.
Yeah. So he calls that illusion Maya,
Yes, Maya.
this belief in separateness.
Yes, exactly. It's like mistaking a wave for being separate from the ocean when
Yeah.
they're actually one and the same.
One and the same. So instead of clinging to those like fleeting waves of personality, we could try to connect with that deeper ocean of love.
Exactly. That's the essence of this little shift.
Yeah.
Moving from a perception of separation to a recognition of oneness.
Okay.
It's not about denying the reality of our experiences, but seeing them from a wider, more compassionate perspective.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like this little shift could have a huge impact on our relationships, but I'm curious, how does this apply to everyday life? Like, how do we actually put this into practice?
That's a great question. You know,
That's where it gets really interesting.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's not just a philosophical concept. He gives us actual tools and practices
Okay.
to apply this in our daily lives.
I'm excited to hear more about that. Me too. So he suggests we start by asking ourselves some key questions, like
Yeah.
when we're faced with a challenging event,
Mhm.
instead of getting all swept up in the emotion of it,
Yeah.
we can ask ourselves, what can I learn from this?
So it's about transforming a potentially negative experience into an opportunity for growth.
Yeah,
Like if someone cuts me off in traffic, instead of getting angry,
exactly.
I could ask myself, what lesson about patience or letting go can I learn from this?
Yes. It's about shifting from reaction to reflection,
Okay.
from being controlled by our emotions to choosing a more conscious response.
I like that.
Yeah.
And what about objects? How does this little shift change how we see the things around us?
He encourages us to contemplate the impermanence of objects.
Oh, okay.
Like we were talking about earlier. Even something that seems solid, like, say, your phone,
Yeah.
is ultimately made up of mostly empty space.
I'm trying to visualize that now, like all the atoms swirling around, constantly in motion. It's like seeing the world through a microscope.
Exactly. And when we remember that everything is in constant flux, it can help us detach from material possessions
Mhm.
and appreciate the present moment more.
That's such a powerful reminder in a world that's like obsessed with acquiring more and more stuff. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of this little shift is applying it to our relationships with other people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely where it gets most personal, but also where it can have the most profound impact.
Yeah.
Remember the monk's advice about seeing the love behind people's eyes?
Yes, that really stuck with me.
Hmm.
But honestly, I struggle with that sometimes. Like, what about people who are deliberately hurtful or unkind? Can we really see love in them too?
That's a question a lot of people grapple with.
Yeah.
And Gurudev acknowledges that it's not always easy, right?
Right.
We're human, we have biases, and sometimes people's actions trigger deep wounds within us.
It's like we're conditioned to see the world through this lens of judgment,
Huh.
to categorize people as good or bad.
Right, exactly. And he says that kind of thinking keeps us trapped in Maya,
Okay.
in that illusion of separateness. He reminds us that everyone, including ourselves, is on a journey of growth and transformation,
Mhm.
and that sometimes those journeys are messy and painful.
So it's about recognizing that even those who cause harm are still worthy of compassion.
Exactly. It doesn't mean condoning their actions,
Okay.
but it does mean trying to understand the pain, the fear, the conditioning that might be driving those actions.
That's a challenging perspective, but also a liberating one.
Yeah.
It's like breaking free from the shackles of judgment and opening ourselves up to this more expansive view of humanity.
And that's ultimately what this little shift is all about, recognizing our interconnectedness,
Mm.
seeing the world through a lens of love and understanding,
Mm.
and experiencing the freedom that comes with that realization.
It sounds like a continuous practice.
It is.
A lifelong journey of unlearning these old patterns and embracing new ways of seeing.
Yes, it's a process.
But I have to admit, it all feels a bit overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Well, he doesn't offer a rigid formula,
Sure.
but he emphasizes the importance of awareness. It's about cultivating a habit of mindfulness, of noticing our thoughts, feelings, and reactions without judgment.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of enlightenment, but rather like a gentle turning towards a more compassionate way of being.
Beautifully put. It's about those small, everyday moments where we choose to pause, to reflect, and to respond with a little more kindness and understanding.
That feels much more approachable, yeah. Like, instead of getting frustrated in traffic, I can take a deep breath and remember that everyone is on their own journey.
Exactly. And as we practice this little shift in those everyday moments, it gradually starts to permeate our entire experience of the world.
It's like we're slowly changing the channel from one of judgment and separation to one of love and connection.
Yes.
But I'm curious, if this shift is so simple,
Yeah,
why does it feel so challenging at times?
that's a great question. I think it's because we're swimming against the current of a society that often values competition,
Right.
individualism, instant gratification.
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with messages that reinforce separation and judgment.
It's true. Everywhere we look, there are messages telling us to be better, faster, stronger, to strive for more, to compare ourselves to others.
And those messages can be very seductive, very
Mhm.
hard to resist.
Yeah.
But the truth is, they're based on a false premise, the illusion of separateness. And the more we buy into that illusion, the more we perpetuate suffering in ourselves and in the world.
So it's like we have to consciously choose a different path, a path that leads towards unity and love.
Exactly. It's a conscious decision to step out of that old paradigm and into a new way of being.
That takes courage, doesn't it? To
Yeah.
go against the grain, to trust that there's a different way.
It does. But it's a courage that's born out of a deep desire for something more. A
Mhm.
longing for a world that's based on love and compassion rather than fear and separation.
That's a vision worth fighting for, even if it's one small shift at a time.
And the beauty of it is that each little shift has a ripple effect.
Okay.
As we transform our own perception,
Yeah.
we start to influence those around us.
Like a pebble dropped in a pond, creating waves that spread outwards.
Oof, precisely. So even though it may feel like an individual journey, it's ultimately a collective one.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in this together. And each step we take towards love and unity contributes to a more compassionate and just world for all.
It's a powerful reminder that we have the power to create change, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
And that's where the real magic happens. When we stop seeing ourselves as separate individuals
Yeah.
and start recognizing our interconnectedness,
Mm.
we tap into an infinite source of love, wisdom, and creativity.
It's like we're awakening to a whole new dimension of reality.
And that's what I find so inspiring about Gurudev's teachings. It's not about escaping from the world.
Right.
It's about transforming our experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's about seeing the world with new eyes, with a heart full of love and compassion, and realizing that everything is interconnected, that we are all part of something much greater than ourselves.
It's a beautiful vision, and one that gives me hope for the future. But before we get too carried away with the big picture,
Yeah.
I want to bring it back to our listeners.
Okay.
What's one practical step they can take today to start integrating this little shift into their own lives?
That's a great question. I think the most powerful practice is simply to pay attention.
Okay.
Notice your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
When you find yourself judging yourself or others, pause and ask yourself, is this thought serving me? Is it aligned with the vision of love and unity that I want to create?
So it's about becoming more aware of the stories we tell ourselves and choosing to rewrite those stories with a more compassionate pen.
Beautifully put. It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose our thoughts,
Okay.
and that those choices shape our reality.
It sounds like a simple practice, but one that requires a lot of awareness and intention.
It does. But the more we practice, the more natural it becomes. And the rewards are immeasurable.
I'm excited to start incorporating this into my own life.
Me too.
It's like a little treasure map leading to a more peaceful and joyful way of being.
And the best part is, it's a treasure that's available to everyone.
Mm.
We all have the capacity for love, compassion, and wisdom.
Right.
It's just a matter of remembering who we truly are.
That's a beautiful reminder. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring everything from emotional reactions to the nature of reality itself.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But before we wrap up this episode, I want to give you the last word. What's the one message you hope our listeners will take away from this deep dive into just a little shift?
I think the biggest thing is remembering that we all have the power to choose our perspective. It's not about denying the tough stuff in life,
Right.
but approaching it with a new lens, one that sees connection and love and the potential for growth in every situation.
It's so empowering to remember that we're not just victims of our circumstances.
Absolutely.
We have a choice
You always have a choice.
to react with fear and judgment or with love and understanding.
And, as we make those choices, we not only change our own experience, but we also contribute to a more compassionate world.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like we're all threads in this big tapestry of life.
I love that image.
And each choice we make, it affects the whole.
Exactly. So as you go about your day today, remember that you have the power to create those ripples of love and understanding.
Hmm.
Start with a small shift in your own perspective and just watch as it spreads outwards, touching the lives of everyone around you.
What a beautiful thought to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
My pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
It has. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on Echoes from the Source. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to see the world with new eyes and embrace the power of shifting your perspective. Until next time, stay curious and keep seeking.